Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. My name is Keir Radnich, and I'm introducing this session today. I send the apologies and best wishes from Gianni Merlo, who is otherwise detained, organizing an event tonight in Rome before the launch of the Euro finals later this week. But he is with us in spirit. And of course, he will be joining us on the individual tutorial sessions later this week in all the usual different languages. Same time, same place as ever. So you can be sure that he is thinking about us just as we are all thinking about him and missing his unique contributions today. As you know, the sessions that we're working on this week are about the subject of I suppose, the technology and the technological future that we have as journalists. If Gianni were here, he would tell you that he comes from Jurassic Park. It is one of his favorite sayings, which he has been wheeling out and repeating, I think, ever since the film came out, because he and older journalists, like I have to say, I'm afraid, myself, we started in a very different era of media technology. In fact, I think when I started, the word media didn't even exist, because there were these three pigeonholes. There was television, there was radio, and there was the written press, and that was it. But then, of course, over time, technology overtook all the old traditions that had existed, really. I mean, some of them for about a century, and of course, the written press since Caxton. And so we had to adjust, and journalists have had to adjust regularly to changing technology. I used to be able to mark each succeeding World Cup by the new technology we had, whether it was the use of, the first time I think I used fax was at the World Cup in Argentina in 1978. After that, when we got to the United States for the World Cup in 1994, we were using these funny little black machines called Tandy machines, which you sort of, it looks prehistoric now. You sort of plugged it into a telephone socket, and sometimes it worked, and sometimes it sent your story, and quite often it didn't. And the Tandy machines were so flimsy that I remember at the final of the World Cup in Los Angeles, the sun was so hot that the little Tandy machines began to melt and buckle and bend. And a lot of the guys from the American Secret Service had to be sent out into the stadia to find cardboard boxes to put over these little machines in the press boxes to keep the world's media happy. And as you know, if the media is not happy, the media makes a lot of noise. We journalists are very good at complaining. We're good at complaining about conditions. We're good at complaining, yeah, sometimes about each other. But so we got Tandy machines. Then 4 years later, France, we started going into proper, I would say, proper computers and laptops. And in your own era, of course, you now work not only with computerized technology through laptops and tablets, but also particularly with smartphones and what we can do with smartphones in terms of not only recording voice and images of good quality, but in terms of editing is remarkable. And we've seen evidence of that in the AIPS Awards. Talking of the AIPS Awards brings me to introduce our first guest, Bernt Jacob Oxness from Norway, who is one of the most outstanding Norwegian feature journalists. And he was most particularly and relevantly, I suppose, to AIPS, He was the winner of the AIPS Sports Media Award in 2020 in the Best Colour Piece category with his story entitled Mum is Dying. This was a series that uncovered the health links linking fluorinated ski wax. And it was published in his national newspaper, Dagbladet. And I'll ask Bernt to tell you a little bit more about the subject in a moment. Just to give you a little bit more information about Bernt. 2016, 2017, he and his colleagues had a very big success with a 9-part series. It was digital journalism, and it was entitled The Baby in the Plastic Bag. That earned him selection for the 2017 European Press Prize shortlist. And his work's been recommended by journalists and editors around the world. So Bernt, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to AIPS eCollege today. Thank you very much for your time, for also your contributions to AIPS, to which I think will inspire some of the young colleagues here today who have come on, because all of you can think that where you're coming from now, you could be where Bernt is next year. The AIPS Awards will go on, the opportunities will be there, and this is part of a career ladder that we are all on and we have all been on. It's like the modern technology for the media, it doesn't stop. Just to mention, a little later today, we're going to be joined by Ashley Broadley, who is the head of sport at the Press Association in the UK, also to talk on this same theme. But for now, I'd like to welcome and hand over to Bernt and ask him very kindly to tell us a little bit about himself, about his award-winning work, and about the technology that he has used, is using, and maybe thinks he would like to be using tomorrow. So Bernt, if I may, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this lovely introduction. Hi everyone, I'm so honored and grateful to be able to speak to you. Well, for the coming hour or so. I will take you into my tools and techniques of writing. Firstly, I will start with the big piece, a series I wrote a few years ago. It's not about sports itself, but all writing and storytelling has some universal and common. So on the October the 8th of 1991, the 58-year-old man Tor Nilsen went to the West Churchyard in Oslo to take care of a family grave. While standing in the graveyard, planting some flowers, he hears a weird sound. He ignores it at first. He first believes that it must be a bird or a cat there, but the sound returns a couple of times. It sounds like a little scream or more like a whining. And the man turns instinctively around, walks up the cemetery, follows the sound, and 20 meters further up, he sees a plastic bag close to a tree. And it's stained with blood. He leans down and starts to untie the knot of the plastic bag, and there he finds a newborn baby, a living, naked newborn baby, blue in the skin, ice cold. The man is obviously in shock, paralyzed, thinking that the baby can die only by his touch. It's obviously very weak. So Tor just thinks about getting help. As he runs up the hill to the church, he begins to doubt himself. Did I really see what I saw? Have I become crazy? So he moderates a bit when he meets two people at the church. The first is a random maintenance worker, Arne Larsen. And Tor said that there's something inside a plastic bag down in the cemetery, a cat or a little dog, or, well, it can be a human baby, Tor said. He walked further into the church office and repeated the same words to Berit Pil Johansen, the church secretary. And they both thought he was only a very confused guy, so they did not believe him at first. But Tor brought Berit and Arne down to the area he heard the sound and found the bag. Tor pointed at the spot where he found the baby inside the plastic bag. And there they saw this newborn child in a plastic bag connected to the placenta and a lot of blood. And Berit realized that it is seconds and minutes before this baby is dead. She gently lifts the baby, still in the bag, walks with the baby towards the church again, and the three people manage to stop a car. And inside the car is a retired man, Alan Døviken, and Berit jumps into the passenger seat. She holds the plastic bag with the infant on her lap, and she makes sure to open the bag well so the baby won't suffocate by the plastic. So just drive, she shouts. We have to go to the doctor now, just hurry. Berit directed the driver down the walkway at the back of the church where there is barely room for a car. They turn out to Ulvo's road leading up to Berit's private doctor about 500 meters further up. And they stop the car outside the doctor's center, and Berit runs with the baby in the plastic bag up the stairs. And the doctor, Jan Nilsen, of course, also shocked, takes the child out of the bag, warms it with his hands, and the doctor says, we need to get him to the hospital right away. And he quickly understands that this must be, have to call the emergency number 113, and the baby has significant breathing problems and it's incredibly cold. And the ambulance arrives. They drive the same route as they came down Ulvo Road again towards the hospital, and the newborn child is brought in there at 12:01, 29 degrees Celsius cold with significant breathing problems and extreme hypothermia. And the baby gets life-saving treatment and is placed in the incubator. And there we finish chapter 1 out of 9 of the story we have called The Baby in the Plastic Bag. I'll try to share a screen. I'm not good at this, but well, just to let's try. Do you still see me, or do you see anything?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay.
Yeah, we see the intro.
Well,
yeah.
It will start just like this. And then we got all the parts down here. So, and here is chapter 1, for example. So here we started the chapter 2. So hi again. So the idea was I wanted to document a story where a newborn baby was found abandoned, either dead or alive, without a known parent. I remember from my childhood that a few of these cases had made a huge impression on me from the media. So in my research, I found 10 such known cases in Norway over the last 30 years. But among these 10 cases, one story differed markedly. A newborn baby born October 8, 1991, found in a plastic bag at the West Cemetery in Oslo, And the fact that it was in a plastic bag on a graveyard added something more, an even greater mystery. It had something to do with the bizarre poetry, the newborn in the churchyard, the plastic bag, the frost on the grass, on the graveyard, the blood. But there was marginal information apart from the press coverage at the time, which just blew over after a week. But slowly we saw this massive tale of mystery, family, human compassion, and international cooperation growing and growing. And everything about the story attracted me because the case was not as obvious as one might think. It was psychologically intriguing and complex. And early stages of the work, I thought this is not a one-dimensional, straightforward story of an unwanted child who was abandoned. The story had several layers and so potentially thrilling and tremendously exciting. And I thought, here is a huge story, a huge epic tale of life, death, and love, and a story about a newborn baby found in a plastic bag. So this case existed in our news archives. It was a national media story for about a week in 1991. So this is one of my favorite things, to systematically try to find stories in the newspapers or media archives some years back in time, in the distant past or in the close past. There's so many potentially golden news stories there which can be developed into long form storytelling or medium long pieces. So in this specific story, there was limited information accessible, but this one of the most important things to remember, as John Franklin, the first Pulitzer Prize winner in the feature writing category, said, most news stories are endings without the beginnings attached. So most news stories are endings without the beginnings attached. They say nothing about the beginning of the story, about the hows and whys. And these answers typically make a far more interesting story than the mere facts to me. And that's where narrative journalism is so powerful, the attempt to find a deep context and tell them. So in order for such a huge project to succeed, there are a lot of components. Of all these components, there's one I'm most interested in, and that's the storytelling and writing. One thing is to find a story or an idea. That's brilliant. But another thing is to tell and present the material you have found. You can find such a wonderful story. It's great, but it's the way the findings are conveyed and narrated, which makes your long story extraordinary. So I will concentrate the lecture on this phase of the work. So back to the baby in the plastic bag. Let's look at the next chapters 2 or 3, and because as the doctors and nurses try to save the baby's life at the hospital, the police enter the cemetery and start their work. Two central questions form the engine of my story, because all stories and all writing must have an engine. Does the baby survive? And who is the child? Who is the mother? Who is the father? And what is the circumstances here? Then the crime technician, Knut Rickus, comes to the hospital to get the plastic bag that the baby was found in, still with the placenta inside, and goes to the forensic institute to search through the plastic bag. So then inside the plastic bag, policemen find a small note of paper covered in blood, and they first believe that there's a message the mother has left. But then they wash the blood off and see that there's a receipt from a shop in Oslo. And that's how we end chapter 2 with a cliffhanger. The policeman goes to the police house in Oslo to show what he has found, and the receipt appears to be from a well-known bag store in Oslo. And there's a sum and a date dated 5 days in advance, and at this point there are also confirmed from the hospital that the baby is either fully or half Asian of origin. And the police are then going to the bag store. Nobody can remember anything special from this date. And there's many people in that day, but on day 2, there's one of the staff who recalls that yes, there were 2 Asian girlfriends in that day. The worker in the store thinks she remembers that one of them paid with a check, and we have already sent it to the bank. The staff says that if you are really lucky and get a check from the bank, the name and the address of the person who bought the bag should be on the check. So police officer goes to the bank, and after some discussion, he gets the check out, and the name of the check belongs to a Philippine citizen resident in Oslo, and the address is Ullevålsalleen 5B, and it's strikingly close to the cemetery where the baby was found, just a few minutes walk from. So I'll try. There's a recap. This has happened so far. So then the police gets to this address in Ullevålsalleen 5B, and the police first find a healthy woman. She confirms that, yes, I have paid the bag. It's my name, but she insists she does not know any baby. And the police ask if she lives with other persons, and she's a bit skeptic. But the police finds another woman on a sofa, and she looks a bit reduced. And the police says a newborn baby has been discovered in the churchyard just up the road. We suspect the baby is yours. And then the woman breaks down in tears. She eventually confirmed, yes, I gave birth to a child a month before was the term, and the birth was started outdoors while I went on my daily trip in the neighborhood. And in the morning, I got up in the bathroom, completed the birth there, and the child, the baby, did not live. It was dead. It was breathing. It was not breathing. She claims, and I shook it, but there was no sound or motion. She then found 2 plastic bags under the sink in the closet in the bathroom, and she put the baby inside and knotted the bag, she told. And she told she got no money for the funeral and did not know anyone in Norway. Then she went to the cemetery and put the bag with the baby in an invisible place for it to be found. But then the police officer said that it's just a small thing we have to tell you, and that's your baby is alive. He has been cared for at the hospital. And then this woman just breaks down and cries. But it was far from the end of the story. It was only the end of chapter 3 out of 9. So I won't go through all this story. If you can check it up on Google, baby on the plastic bag. So, but the important thing to say is a few words about all this. Soon we stood in front of a new turning point in our story, as in a movie and a narrative or a written story needs for an action to go forward. But it's not just pressing buttons and finding a catchy turn in journalism. I cannot make a nice transition, fabricate a scene or that just suited the plot, because this is journalism. I know myself, I had specialized in that type of human touch stories, true stories. In recent years of my career, I had written about gays who committed suicides, a mother who has lost her 2 twins in a car crash. They were born together and died together. I had written about a young widower under 30 years, about drug addicts with children. I had written the life story of Hilda Feste, a 99-year-old who was raped and killed in her home. And I've written about children who grew up in the underground of Bucharest. I had written about white poor people in the USA and a Norwegian ski star who become a drug addict, and a man who lost his wife, and her children, 5 and 7 years old, in a plane crash. I followed an elderly lady and the last days of her life, and I followed Norway's oldest married couple until one of them died. I had written about a Norwegian woman who witnessed that her husband was shot and killed during their wedding night in South Africa. And I wrote a story about the guy who was third most matches for Norway's national youth under 16 and under 17 teams who tragically committed suicide. And I wrote about a youth who stayed home from school for 9 months because of bullying, a football player who played at the time's best youth team of Manchester United and ended up as a courtesy driver while his 10 teammates become multi-millionaires and superstars. And I also wrote about the Norwegian-born couple Håkon and Victoria, 18 years old, who went to the island of Utøya on July 21st, 2011, the first trip as a couple. The next day, Håkon and Ida are walking hand in hand and they hear something like a shot and one more. And while Håkon is there paralyzed, Ida runs and she calls for him, Håkon, Håkon, I'm here. And they find back to each other and they run together further, but then they hear the third shot and Victoria rushes again. Håkon cries for her girlfriend, but he never finds her again. And Victoria dies. Håkon managed to flee from the killer who killed 77 people in 72 minutes on the July 22nd, 11 years ago. And a few seconds past 5th of October 2010, a 63-year-old man was cycling over a bridge in Oslo. A witness see him climbing off the bike and he's falling to the ground. And as the ambulance arrives, they find him dead. He was sent to the forensic doctor at the hospital, and the police only had one thing, a key that lay in the inner pocket of the dead man's jacket. They got one hit on a key company in Norway, a street called Nordkappgata in Oslo, but there was no street number in the notes. And a police officer was sent out on the mission, try the key, just start at the number 1 and then and on the street and go from there. So we went over to the street and tried each and every door until he reached number 50, and that door matched the key, and he managed to get inside an apartment on the first floor. And there was an envelope with his name on, and this is how the police could identify Jan Erik Fosshaug, a 63-year-old man, a single child, dead parents without any known spouses or known children. And the police, the graveyard authorities, the population register, and the priest all tried to find the man's survivors without any luck, because Jan Erik Fosshaug apparently had no one. So I went to the funeral on this October Thursday at the Eastern Crematorium in Oslo, and I was the only one present and sat there alone and singing the hymn Abide with Me. And I was thinking with myself, one person must sing for this man. For the first time in my 15-year-old journalistic career, I was crying. And the funeral officer who has previously, put King Olaf of Norway down in the coffin when he died back then, brought the coffin of Jan Erik Fosshaug out on the back part of the church Usually they go out in the front of the church where it's mourning people, but we take the back road now and into the funeral car and on the crematorium. And the coffin with Jan Erik is pushed into the oven at 11:02 a Monday with soft, lazy pop music on the radio in the background. And we do not know their stories. It's probably good like this, the crematorium staff said quietly to me. And the urn remained on the crematorium on this shelf. So the question just was, who is this man? Who is Jan Erik? Who could he end up here alone? No one attending his funeral, the urn left on a shelf. And does the police have the right answer? Does the population register have the right answer? Did he really have no one? This would be the engine in our story, like the engine in all my stories, a human, genuine curiosity that might cause the reader and listener to feel the same, a human, genuine curiosity. And this was the start of my journey into Oslo's dark, forgotten world, and eventually became the long report, The Invisible, which I won the Journalist of the Year from the highest honor in Norwegian press back then. And I also written about a girl from a successful home in Oslo, which was born on the same day as Jens Stoltenberg, the later Norwegian Prime Minister. 16th of March 1959 in Oslo, who lived a nicely and harmonic life until a priest stood at her family home door at Christmas Eve, the year she was 4 years old, and told her father has died in an accident. So then this family and girl just slowly fall apart when we aim to find all the persons who were born on this day, Oslo, 16th of March 1959. Her story and many of the other stories from those born on the same day was even more interesting than the story of a prime minister, and they turn out to be at least powerful. And this work ended in the project Oslo, March 16, 1959. And one day a big television company and a Norwegian broadcasting company said they would develop this article for television with us, and it all became the NRK series Born On, which is based on people born on the same date in Norway. So we also got some award for this. But it also confirmed my theory that the best stories and tales are not found at the top of the society among the elites or the day-to-day news. They're not found at all in talk shows. There's a lovely knowledge share of that in each and every house and home in Norway, in Amsterdam, in Tehran, or in Milan, or in Nairobi. In each and every house in the world, there is a very good, powerful story. And it's all about searching for it, identifying it, and tracking it, and telling it. So 4 years ago, I dedicated my career totally to sports writing and sports documentaries, because I cannot imagine one field in our society so rich and emotional than sports. It's like life itself. It's so full of contrast, so full of big heights and huge drops, triumph and despair, and the minor difference between success and failure. So between making it to the top or not, and all the drama, not only in the sports arenas, but in the human sports athletes' lives, the ups and downs, which just invites us to tell the stories. So I want to tell you a few words about the project. I was lucky enough to win this AIPS awards in colorful writing for Mom is Dying. And okay, let's continue just with talking then. So 3 years ago, skiing magazine in Norway received an anonymous letter from a mom and ski coach telling that she was suffering from cancer. And her doctors at the hospital said that there might be a link between her kidney cancer and the exposure from fluorine ski wax. And she has not only been waxing her children's skis for 12 years, she had spent hours and hours in small garages and sheds waxing for other children she was coached for, without any ventilation the first years. So in this anonymous letter, she was warning against the use of fluorine ski waxes. And the woman who warned against fluorine waxing products was named Toril Stokkebø. She was a 48-year-old mother of three 7 months after she wrote that letter, she died of a very aggressive form of kidney cancer. So in January 2019, I sent an email to Arne Vannebo, Toril Stokkebø's widower. And Stokkebø's fluorine cancer had been mentioned in the media briefly before, but I wanted to tell the whole story of her work as a skiing coach for hundreds of children and young people in a big region in Norway. At the same time, we wanted to dive deeper into the cause of the disease and in the cause of her death. So, and the widower Arne thanked for the email and wrote to me, Toril was born on January 11. She was admitted to the hospital on January 11th, 2016, and was buried January 11th, 2017, the day she would have turned 50 years old. The doctors at the hospital quickly concluded that the cancer could be due to the fluorine exposure in ski waxes. There are many stories about the last 10 months of her life, the cancer, and about her fluorine waxing. Partly of this we have never shared with anyone. I feel time has come for that now, and it's happy to share it with you and Dagbladet. So my instinct was saying that there was so much more to this story. The fluorine and sports link was obvious, and also the universal theme, the mother who was working so hard, the mother who was coached and so loved in the community, and she had been coached for many years for hundreds of ski children and youth. So my aim was to paint a picture of this woman, to make a portrait of her life from start to finish. And everything in between, ups and downs, again, it's so much power in ordinary lives. And the readers can find something common and powerful insight, and this is so good in journalism. So I met the widower. Arne told a story about her wife, and a very touching story. And the sports mom, Toril, who spent hours in the ski waxing tents for children every weekend for 12 years, and who stood on the steepest slopes of the trails and cheered a whole generation of young skiers before she died. But during the conversation with the widower, the project took a whole new turn. Because Vannebo also told us that he had received phone calls and emails from between 5 and 7 widows who had in common that their husbands had died of cancer, and the men were also active in the ski environment and had spent many years in the ski waxing cabins. And the fact that there could be more deaths and more illness as a result of fluorine ski waxing was potentially explosive. So this was the start of the investigative project, The Costs of the Glide, and a group of 4 journalists, including me, was formed and consisting of people with very different backgrounds and qualities. Fluorine has for more than 30 years been the most effective type of ski wax you put under your skis in order to glide faster. It's highly expensive, $150 for 30 grams. And it was first used by the elite and professional only, but it was quickly spread to the amateurs and the youths and even children. So 10 years ago, studies indicated that the potential health risks linked to fluorinated ski waxes. And the professional waxer also started to talk about the health issues, and the professional waxers in Norway then got high-tech waxing buses with the best ventilation. But then what about the thousands of amateur waxers, dads and moms, who had been waxing their children's skis in sheds and garages? Why was the potential health risk never communicated to them? And that was our question. So this is very complex matters, medically and chemically complex. This series counts 60 articles, and the investigation and reporting have been made for almost a year. But we revealed an unknown but very essential story about the national sport in Norway, cross-country skiing. And along the way, we also adopted some innovative methods. In 2019, we got an idea, could we carry out our own research project and examination of the fluorine content in the blood of amateur skiers, a blood test of parents who waxed skis for their children and other amateurs. So in that way, we as a journalist could work forward a safer conclusion about how dangerous these products are for ski enthusiasts and parents that have walked skis for over a long period. And once we collaborated with researchers in Norway, and 1/3 of the waxers were above the EU's tolerance limit for the dangerous fluorinated substance PFOA, and this gives, according to the EU, an increased risk of health damages. And the highest value among these daddy and mummy waxers was 19 times higher than the normal population. And we also found significantly high values of other fluorine compounds that the EU labels as very worrying in the blood of the amateurs. We also wanted to find out exactly what kind of chemicals and dangerous fluorine compounds in the ski waxes. So we used innovative technology and collaborated with a professor at University of Stockholm, and we found that 9 out of 11 of the tested bestseller in the fluorine market has limits values set by the dangerous fluorine compounds. So in other words, they would have become illegal. And the products have an average of 134 times higher PFOA values than this prohibition limit. And the fluorine substances found were also the same as we detected in large quantities in the amateur waxers' blood samples, but not in the blood of the person from the control group. And this nailed the ski waxers to the health effects. Thirdly, we wanted to investigate whether we could find the same harmful environmental toxins and fluorochemicals that we had detected in the blood of amateur waxers and in waxing products in nature and in animals around known ski arenas, because these chemicals is also very harmful for the environment and the substances will never disappear. So we did analysis of the fluorine in soil, in fish, and in earthworms in ski areas and found alarming things. We also went to Italy and found very high levels of fluorine in the blood of the workers who made this the raw material in fluorine ski wax, and some of them were seriously ill. So as you understand, this was a very complex investigative series of articles, and we wanted to these important but complex topics to fully engage the readers. We wanted to deliberately use a human dramatic story to bring complicated medical and chemical issue to life. And we needed a powerful story, a human in flesh and blood highly affected by this. And of course, this was Toriel's story, Mom is Dying. So we let Mom is Dying be the opening of the series about the health risk associated with the fluorine in ski wax. And the strategy was, we wanted to start a project with this demanding theme with one emotional story presented in a moving way. In this way, we could hopefully invite many more readers into this scientifically exciting but difficult matter. And we achieved what we wanted. Nearly 1 million people, 1/5 of the Norwegian population, read the story of the mother who died of cancer, possibly due to fluorine exposure. And readers have spent a total of almost 100,000 hours. That means 12 years reading it altogether. So this is how narrative journalism and writing can be powerful. It's well suited to explain complicated and intricate things. So Mom is Dying was a reminder that well-told, strong, respectful stories about ordinary people can have an enormous impact. And the story also stands through the noise and hits the hearts and the moves. And I made a list of the 9 most important narrative and writing techniques I've used to build the story of both Baby in the Plastic Bag and Mom is Dying. And all the stories I write, basically, it's something common and fundamental. The list is based on good award-winning storytelling experiences from others and which I have learned from and my own. And the first I will mention is all good storytelling creates an expectation. Expectation is not the same as the final answer. And secondly, what creates the greatest expectation and excitements are emotions and feelings. And it's about creating an insecure feeling. We do not know what we will get. And there's always a good tool in narrative journalism. It's not for sure that we will get what we want. We do not know what to get. So with the Baby in the Plastic Bag and Mom is Dying, it's like we don't know what we will get. And working on your story, constructing your story, it's important to hold back information as long as possible. So it's a kind of a manipulation there. The fourth thing I will mention is focus on the order in which you serve the readers the information you have collected. Sequencing is the nice word called in journalism, sequencing. That's the narratives, the DNA. Is you as the narrator and writer who decide when you want to release that and that detail. And remember, you as a writer are in control here. And this is not the case with stories that you can say, and then the story went to its highlight, or then it ended well, because that's not how reality is. The reality is more chaotic, but our stories is more organized and nice. We talk about reality told as good stories. So, and therefore we are waiting to chapter 4 before Toril, the mom, dies. In Mom is Dying, you have to read, well, half an hour or so. But if we have released this detail early on in the chapter 1 or 2, I would have killed the story. Therefore, we are waiting for chapter 6 also to meet the baby in the plastic bag as an adult, while in reality, we met him quite early in the work, because that's a very long story, and we could talk for 2 hours only of how I found this guy in the Philippines. If we had seen the face of the baby in the plastic bag as an adult in chapter 1 or 2, I damaged the nerve of the story. Same if I used a picture of the baby and the mother reunited too early in the plot. We would destroy some of the story. So it's important to hold back information in the construction of the story. And the fifth thing is also essential in storytelling, to create obstacles and challenges. Then the story gets forward and gets more exciting. And it's related to the next point, which is, of course, it's obvious, but it's have to be mentioned, use of cliffhangers. And the timing of your turning points is also important, where the chapters end. And details are very important. Make the details as rich as possible. Or as the American Pulitzer Prize winner Tom French would say, sensory details. Both in Baby in the Plastic Bag and Mom is Dying, I spent weeks and months to get anything as medically authentic as possible, like what happens with children in a hypothermia state, or with a person suffering from this type of kidney cancer as the mom. And the only exact answer is the first case was hidden in the hospital journals in the basement of the hospital. I was trying to win trust so that the doctors would open this 25-year-old journals from 91 for us. So, and we put together the information from the police files, the hospital journals, from the newspaper clips, and the 94 photographs from 91 we found in various archives. And then there was a lot of beautiful information to our story in these pictures, information from the cemetery and the hospital, and we could study the picture, even figure out how the bed and walls in the hospital was like, and what kind of equipment the police used and instrument the doctors used. And the eighth thing is transport your audience inside moments and inside scenes, because in the writing process, you wanted to push the reader's emotions, but without pushing too hard, more subtle, which often triggers stronger emotions. And the ninth thing is open strongly and build it even better. And the best stories grab us and pull us in, and they get even better from there. It's a basic law and mechanism for a story. And of course, the opening section is very seen as very important. Journalists are often very obsessed with it, but so pay attention not only to the beginning, but the end of each small scene, and you keep the reader's attention and desire to read, keep it going all to the end. And the 10th thing, the crescendo, the end. So all stories must have an epic end. One might think, yes, well, that's right, but in real life, the stories do not end dramatically often, but they're more moving towards something calmer, a greater insight and reflection. And to complete the circle, I chose a detail often is more subtle and more suitable as a closure, like gently blowing out the candle in the end. So this was the writing principles and tools I used in Mom is Dying, and in The Baby in the Plastic Bag, and in basically everything story I write. And Mom is Dying is not 9 chapters, it's 4 chapters, and in the end of each chapter, it's an obvious cliffhanger, and also inside the chapter, it's a lot of movement. I built the story along 2 lines: the woman's life and success as a ski coach and caring mom, the way up, and then the woman's story of cancer and her time battling against the illness. So we leave the cancer story on a dramatic point, go back to the sport success and her life before the illness, stops on a cliffhanger as well, and back to the downward spiral of the cancer. So this is a technique to keep up the tension and keep the narrative powerful and exciting. And the text also contained a number of human emotions: fear, joy, panic, excitement, and hope, just like life itself. I have just to mention that we're very proud that the International Ski Federation, partly because of our investigations, decided on a total ban on fluorine in all ski races in all the world shortly after the investigation coverage. And the decision also received worldwide attention. That's cool to mention. And so human people who were falling or were set up for a special test at some point in their lives had over the years become my specialty. It could tip into the parody, but I thought there was a lot of dynamic, lot of life and magic within the ordinary, a unique special drama. If you treat it with respect and dignity, you can hit a very special emotional nerve at the reader. So I was thinking of a legendary report in New York Herald Tribune from the coverage of the murder of John F. Kennedy. When he was buried in November 1963, it was the biggest media event in the story of the United States, and thousands of journalists and media organizations from all over the world was looking exactly the same way in this funeral. And then it was this reporter, Jimmy Breslin, who turned his eyes in a whole different direction to the man who dug John F. Kennedy's grave, a Korea War veteran. And Breslin told his life story. Follow him to this morning when he was commissioned to dig the grave for JFK until he stood there and dug. In the end, in the edge of the cemetery among thousands of people, and watch the JFK was actually buried. And so it's like the Czech author Milan Kundera says, life is elsewhere. The reality is something somewhere else than on Twitter and on in the news press. It's about hitting the strings and the hearts of people in a different way. So I saw this same emotional potential while working out the story of Mom is Dying. But to build such a rich narrative, there are countless of hours, research, interviews, new interviews again with the same people, digging into hospital records after working for a couple of months to get these out, media clips. I wanted to find as many people as possible who could give a true picture of what exactly happened and who to us. And the same thing with in the plastic bag story. I became just obsessed with reconstructing the 33 minutes from the infant was found in the cemetery to they arrived at the hospital, and the first 30 minutes the newborn was treated at the intensive care unit at the hospital, down to the smallest detail. And I know that there were other witnesses and people who could shed light on these critical minutes, the details of the investigations and the work in the hospital with saving the child's life. So in the following research, we found new people, new twists constantly, and we searched and found new people that emphasized other nuances in the storyline from the cemetery, from the doctor's office, and from the hospital from 11:28 to 12:01 that Tuesday, 8th of October 91. Although we had talked to 5 people who helped the babies during the 33 minutes to the hospital, and the following hours in the hospital, I would talk to absolutely everyone I could find, all the nurses at work. Not just the ambulance, one ambulance driver, but both of them, not only one doctor, but his medical secretary and those who sat in the waiting room 25 years ago. If someone were dead, as the man who drove those who found the baby to the doctor and the senior consultant at the hospital, we had to talk relatives and family members of the dead. So it took a long time before we were satisfied. And one example, we came across a picture at the bottom of page 15 in our own newspaper, October of the 10th of 91, 2 days after the baby was brought to the hospital from the cemetery. And it was a picture of a senior doctor at the hospital in front of the incubator where the baby lay, and it was taken by a different photographer than our two staff photographers who covered the story. And this photographer had clearly been able to come into the hospital, and the senior doctor on the picture was dead, as several other key characters in the story. But what about the nurse who stood in the background of that little picture on page 15? And we was just able to see her in the background, and who is she? No one at the hospital could answer this question. We sent the picture to a bunch of people, current and former employees, but no one could recognize her. And the entire project was this, our assumption was that this photographer was taking multiple exposure that day than the single one in the newspaper. So if we obtain the negative folder, we might see this female nurse even clearer enough to identify her. So she might in turn, next turn, tell more details than anyone else about what happened in these minutes and hours in which they struggled to keep the newborn baby alive and how they exactly treated the infant. So for months, on and off, we searched for this 25-year-old negative folder, and we finally found it deep down in our archives. And it turned out that the theory worked. The female nurse, who had only worked briefly at the hospital, had a lot of information since she had been the one the hospital had appointed to take care of the baby 24/7 those days. So because we found this negative folder, you could see pictures of her clearer, and then let's see, that's her. So then people was identifying her. Now towards the end, and clearly we had a ton of material, and we had to organize it into a narrative that had the right amount of flow and tension. Because one thing is finding and collecting material, that's cool. Another thing is a story's success is not determined by what you find alone, but the way the findings are told. In this case, it was very challenging. We dug deep and investigated, sitting with hundreds of pages with notes and documents. When I read my text at one point in the middle of the process, I felt that in some stages it's just stopped up, and the rhythm was staccato, didn't move enough forward. So like in music and in all composition, you need an interlude, a rhythm, a shift in rhythm, or a bridge in order to break up action-packed parts. So I snapped into these longer emotional theme sections before I returned to the harsh reality. I also wanted to use what's in American journalism, new journalism, was the telling detail. It's details that matter, that moves the story forward and provide the information the readers needs. So I had to try to steer away from the descriptions of things and conditions that at best only provide slightly diluted taste and smell. So this was a technical, detailed feature with authentic, complex medical and legal terms and description. Especially in the midsection, it was research heavy, a bit too little human presence. So I had to break up these passages with parts that got the technical details to appear more beautiful. I wanted to push on the reader's emotion. I had to create a good breaks, both as part of the rhythm and with the intention of touching the reader to a greater extent. So here we take the reader into another room, a room where she or he has been challenged in a different way. So from a rhetoric perspective, I will always try to convey in a reader-friendly manner, give the article a pace that is easy to follow and hopefully hard not to follow. So I'm not a master of rhetoric art, but even I was thinking of the three well-known appeal forms in the rhetoric. One, emerge with authority and credibility, ethos. Two, present a compelling subject matter, logos. And last but not least, move your readers, recipients, pathos. Pathos is a strong technique, a powerful instrument, and a dangerous instrument. And the narrative writing can often lose at this point. It can lose its authority on the road. Week after week, I try to force myself to keep up the standard, never be tempted to having to be able to top myself. So dwell where it's necessary, hold on a nerve, hold, and write up to the pathetic if necessary, but then leave it on time. Many of the stories I do, we have developers, tech people who come on the field. I'm really interested in that part as well. And we are making plans, and this baby in the plastic bag, it took almost a year to complete. And we worked on design, structure, development, and the serial strategies parallel to the journalistic work. So everything was made and programmed from scratch to fit the piece of journalism. The online presentation and packaging is vital, and it's essential that the effects and the digital multimedia details should not stand in the way of the story, but rather reinforce moods, make an emotion linger, press the right buttons. But the biggest lesson I have learned, the story itself conquer everything. Your cool portrait photos and delicious animated graphics, even your perfectly cut and inventive texted video are not worth much unless they support the story. So in fact, all the bling bling can distract us from the flow of the story. The story is alpha omega, the beginning and the end. So thank you.
Bernt, thank you very much indeed. That was fascinating. I think particularly everyone will have been captivated really by the way you managed to use these digital techniques and potential that we have to keep the story going and keep moving it on chapter by chapter. In that sense, I think you are a modern day digital Charles Dickens who used to tell his story in a weekly magazine, week by week by week, and keep the cliffhanger going and keep the narrative going and keep developing the characters. I mean, that was fascinating. Are you able to stay with us?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Because what I'd like to do is move, if you like, to a different pace in kind of work and introduce Ashley Broadley from the Press Association in London. I saw him on screen now and I've lost him again. Ashley, are you there?
I'm here, yeah, I'm here. Sir.
All right, excellent. Thank you for joining us. Because I think by comparison with the work that Bernt has been telling us about this fascinating development, Bernt, you live and work in a very dark world, if I may say so.
That's right.
I think maybe we'll come back later and ask you how you stay psychologically and professionally strong through these tales, even when you went into sport. Ashley, Ashley Broadley is head of sport for Press Association here in the UK, and obviously the work of an agency is and a national agency, an international agency really is very different in terms of immediacy, pressure and pace and turning a story round. So I'd like, Ashley, if you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about yourself and your work as a contrast really to what you may have gathered that we've just heard from Bernt about his fascinating work in Norway.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I only caught the end of Bernt. It sounded fascinating. I'll still look at it. I will look at that afterwards. And also, I feel quite humble now having to follow that on some talking about sports journalism, which, in the grand scheme of things, there's a famous quote about sport being the most important, unimportant thing. So I think that sort of sums sport up. But it does bring a lot of pleasure to people, but to follow Bernt's story is quite difficult. Yes, I started out in journalism in the mid 1990s on a local newspaper in the north of England, where I progressed to be crime reporter before joining the Press Association as a news reporter. in the north of England as well. I then moved to London, where I became the night editor on the news desk, and did 4 years there. And then in 2007, moved back up north in England to our northern headquarters, where our sports operation is held, where I became sports editor. So I've been doing this now for 14 years or so, and in those 14 years, as you can imagine, I've seen quite a lot of changes in journalism and sports journalism. Being able to cover some fantastic stories. The London Olympics in 2012 stands out as one. Don't ask me about the current Olympics, because that is becoming a nightmare to sort out, as I'm sure you can imagine. We've had a good, successful period over the last few years. The pressures of the industry continue, of course, but we've kept our journalists' numbers up to a similar level, which is fantastic. We invest in our journalism and our journalists. We see it as important across news, sport, video, photography, and all the strands that come down for that. The key is to have our journalists there on the ground reporting. It's something that comes from the editor-in-chief, and it's a fantastic attitude to have, because that is so important, that we still have so many journalists around gathering content, holding people to account, reporting on events. So yeah, it's a potted history of my career. I've always loved sport. I really have. Football, cricket, golf. I never thought I'd get into sports journalism. Bizarrely, I was always a bit of a news hound and enjoyed news. And one of the things I did when I moved across into sport, I took some of the news values into sport. I found that it needed a lot more news focus in sport, and I think that's something we've seen over the last few years. A lot of newspapers have followed that, and they see breaking news, a lot of sports news correspondence now. So I think that has helped me in many ways. I'm still in awe at many of our journalists who have an encyclopedic knowledge of sport. Thank God they do, because I certainly don't. They are amazing. Our journalists are amazing, and that having that knowledge of the sport that you're invested in is absolutely vital, and it will stand you out more than anything, because you can bring so much to the table. So yeah, that's a bit of a potted history here of what I do and where I'm from. I mean, we're 66 journalists, I think we've got currently on sport alone. Significant budget to still send people around the world, backed by the editor-in-chief. So we're covering Formula One, England. It's very UK focused, obviously. England cricket. At the Euros, we'll be concentrating on Wales, Scotland, and England, but also covering all the other teams. So yeah, it's a fascinating, fantastic job. I'm very lucky to be in it. I love it so much. I think you can count on one hand how many days I've not wanted to come into the office in a 20-odd year career, which I think says something.
Ashley, yeah, thank you for that. You say you've got 66 journos on PA Sport. How many correspondents do you have?
I couldn't give you an exact figure, but I know it's well over 100 in sport, well over 100. We have correspondents covering all Championship, League One and League Two football. For those who are unfamiliar with that, that's the tier 2, 3 and 4 of the England Professional League. We also have a network who we use through the England and Wales Cricket Board to supply cricket reports to us. We've got 2 small networks of rugby, one of rugby union of about a dozen correspondents covering rugby union, a similar amount for rugby league, which is a more northern-based rugby sport, and it's well over 100 in the UK that we use on a freelance and casual basis.
Sure. We've done a lot of work in these courses over the last few weeks on investigative journalism, in-depth work. If you caught the end of Bernt just now, I mean, in-depth almost doesn't cover the level and extent of his work. Do you concentrate not just, but only on the day's news, or do you have a separate operation that looks more in depth in terms of features, in terms of investigations?
We have a sports news correspondent, so it's one person essentially who has the remit to look for those sort of stories. PA was the first British organisation, my understanding is, to appoint a sports news correspondent, and that was way back in the day, and it was a chap called Martin Ziegler, who now is at the Times. I'm sure Keir knows him. Some of you may know of him. Now it's a journalist called Jamie Gardner. He has a remit to investigate, get to know people. If he wants to go off diary, that's fine. I encourage him to go off diary for as long as he wants. The challenge we have with it only being one person is that every day there's something breaking. Every day there's a story that he ends up, so he's having to find the time. All reporters are encouraged to find exclusive stories. They have it set in their KPIs to find so many exclusive stories every year.
Sorry, what's a KPI?
Key performance indicator, a part of the performance review, so that I can have regular catch-ups with them. I'm constantly meeting them, seeing them, working on their strengths, any weaknesses, any training they need. It's a real positive system that we've got in place at PA, where it encourages us to meet up more regularly, improve communication. If they have any concerns, they can come to me, and also gives them an idea of what we require. So we ask for these exclusives. So many, it's not a huge amount. It's not anything that's unobtainable, but it sets a bar where they should be sort of aiming at getting exclusive interviews and any sort of off diary stories. So they are actively encouraged to do that, but we don't have a separate pool of people who are looking at them.
Okay, and what percentage of your guys' work would you say is video, blogs, vlogs, so on?
Yeah, so there's 66 journalists in total. Of those, it's around about half of those are actually out in the field gathering content. The others are production journalists working directly in websites, etc. So of those journalists who are out in the field, all bar 3 of them. So if there's there's 36, I think it is, all but 3 of them are all trained to do video and all have video cameras. The 3 who don't have video cameras, interestingly, Jamie, the sports news guy, because he potentially, when you're talking to contacts, you don't want to be thrusting a video camera in their face when it's off-record chats. The second one is Phil Duncan, who is our Formula 1 correspondent, because there's no point in having a camera due to rights issues. He can't get his camera onto any racetracks. And the third is Phil Casey, our golf reporter. For similar reasons, he can't get the camera into any of the golf tournaments. Everyone else is multi-skilled at PA. They know that when they go out on jobs that they are expected, when possible, to shoot video for us, take pictures with their iPhone, take video with their iPhone if that's more suitable. In the recent Europa League and Champions League finals, which both had English clubs at, our reporter did not take their video camera because of baggage on the planes, but took the phone, and on the iPhone shot some really good video of fans celebrating and enjoying themselves, took some pictures, and these pictures we saw were in the Times, so they were of a good enough quality taken on the iPhone that went in the Times newspaper. And the video we use ourselves and sent to our video customers as well. So a journalist today in sport has to be multi-skilled across a variety of working on different platforms. And they're also encouraged to work on social media a lot, have a social media presence, and to varying degrees of success. Simon Peach, our chief football writer, has got over 100,000 followers on Twitter, and I know that doesn't compare to your Henry Winters or Piers Morgans, but from an agency perspective, it's quite a large amount of people. So, and I think they're only following him for Manchester United gossip, but who knows?
Yeah, thank you. I think if one of the great things that we've heard today from the two of you, Bernt and Ashley, is the breadth and the significance and the integration of video work with what we might call old-fashioned journalistic qualities, and how being able to work with the technology that we have today is essential, whether we're working in sport, immediate results of the moment, if you like, a single dimension journalism, or whether we're working in three-dimension in-depth work. And I think that's been the two of you have given us a fascinating example of the breadth of essentials, if you like, of the technology we have today and its potential. I would like now really to throw open to questions from our worldwide audience, and obviously I know chafing at the bit will be my fellow mentors, Martin, Ricardo. Jean-Paul, I think, is going to save himself for Friday. So if in alphabetical order, Martin Mazur. Martin, you may have a question to ask that we've prompted by the fascinations that we've heard.
Thank you, Keir, and thank you to our wonderful guests today. Other than a question, I think I have a question. I have many questions, but I wanted to emphasize something based on what Bernt magnificently explained about the baby in the plastic bag. I think we are full now of babies in plastic bags in news reporting. We find all this news and we let them die as a journalist without going in depth and trying to find out the spirit, the soul of the news. And we get used just to being consumers, like fast food eaters, without even realizing that there are magnificent stories there to be uncovered. And we only need a little bit of curiosity, as Bernt said, to try to find out. Then maybe, yes, you become obsessed with this, but the rest of the media landscape are probably forgetting, or we're probably forgetting about the human side of these stories, and we just publish and publish and publish, and the smaller the better. So I think it's very important now to emphasize that the long form came here as a response for a system, a model that was not really producing the needed effects. I mean, for many years we've learned that we needed clicks, right, in a digital media, and then we learned that clicks were not very interesting in the end because we needed time. We changed the model from clicks to time, so the people would spend a lot of time reading certain stories. But for that, we needed to provide those stories, and here's the thing: if we only trust in analytics, Google Analytics, then maybe we make a mistake, which is also what happened in many sports media, trying to move into the showbiz, trying to publish wags, the word for wives and girlfriends of footballers, because they had a lot of clicks, but they were not very interesting as a media product, as a journalist product. So analytics are here to help us. I think it's very important to know if you've written a long story like Bernt has, to know how many people actually went chapter by chapter, all this story, because it will help you also understand how many people read your story from the beginning to the end. But we cannot just trust on analytics, because there is a big problem. What happens if the people does not click on a story because you think that the people will not click on that story? So how do you manage to steer, to guide the people into new kind of stories? And my question to Bernt is, Bernt, you when you wrote Mommy's Dying, you decided to write it in a present tense, right? You didn't just put the end of the story. So how did you manage to understand that, just as it happened with the baby in the plastic, the present will be more entertaining because there is suspense, there is mystery, and rather than just report the story and kill the story in a way?
Yeah, first, Martin, that's a lovely comment. I totally agree with your introduction. So, and I decided to use this model of writing because I know from earlier that this is the way you hit the heart, and we wanted to tell a very complex story, and to engage the readers, we have to find a strategy that worked, to not simplify it, but tell it in a attracting way, and a human way, and an emotional way. So that was the reason we chose that kind of storytelling, rather than, because this story had been briefly mentioned in the news press a couple of years before, but in a very little in depth. So we wanted to go really in depth. So yes.
Thank you, Bernt. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Can I just pick up a point there?
Yeah,
Kim?
sure.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. I found that fascinating.
No. Great.
Fascinating question there, and it reminds me of something that we lose by losing newspapers. In that you are given, people are making an editorial choice for you when they put together a newspaper. And one of the things I would miss if I stopped reading a newspaper, which I still do, is having stories picked for me. So I read a story that I might not otherwise have come across. So all the algorithms online and everything else knows what I like, but I might not have read a story. I might come across a story in a newspaper that I would never have come across online, because this story has been picked for me. This hasn't been. This has been picked for a general audience, and I think that's something we really miss with newspapers. Now, I'm absolutely very focused on digital, and what you say there, Martin, makes a lot of sense as well. How do you measure value? 3 people clicking on one story, is that valuable? Well, if all 3 people clicking on a story are all multimillionaires, then yes, it does have value, but how do we find that? Whereas, 100 million people clicking on a story, nothing generates from that in advertising revenue. It's got no value hardly. So it's a fascinating subject. We could go on for hours about it, but the newspaper thing really interests me, because it's something I really miss when I go online, because I miss coming across those surprising stories I would never have seen otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's excellent, Ashley. Our next mentor, Ricardo. I know you're out there. Ricardo Romani.
Thanks for unmuting me. Thank you very much.
You really are out there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm out here. Thank you very much. Thank for your yes, very interesting conversation. I'll try to be very quick because I rather leave some room to our students, and I'm sure they have questions, and I see a huge number of people that want to. So you both touched something, a topic that I really care about it, and Italian daily newspaper, sporting newspaper, Gazzetta dello Sport built a strategy later on in the last few years using the clicks that attract people on big breasts, unfortunately, to drive the people into content. And this is a little bit sad. And what drives me to pose the question, we need to fight this battle between speed and accuracy. But the digital world, not only the digital world, has so much appetite for fast, quick response to events that it's really impossible to be accurate on the short range. So maybe starting with Ashley, how do you really solve that problem? Trying to be accurate, trying to be very, very, very news-oriented while performing at such a high speed, at such a high volume of information.
Yeah, it's challenging, and I think it's got even more challenging in recent years with the advent of social media. The amount of information that's coming in quickly. I'd rather be late and not first than wrong is how I always look at things, and that's what I pass down to staff. Verify everything. We've made mistakes in the past. You know, a sportsman or woman on Twitter may have been having a bit of fun and we've taken it seriously, and they've announced something, an injury when it's not an injury. It's really challenging. You have to have levels of journalistic skill in there in order to make sure that you try and verify everything, check everything out. But I totally agree. It's becoming harder and harder as this information is coming at you faster and faster. It's a very difficult part of the job.
Thank you very much.
How do you find that with pressure, Ashley? Because you're an agency, so you've got newspapers waiting on your your stories, your news.
Yeah, I mean, pressure's part of the job. I mean, people react differently to it, you know, and I have to keep my eye out for people who are struggling with pressure. Well-being is vitally important for staff. So it can be difficult, but I will back the PA reporter. If I'd rather nothing goes out or it goes out late. If it's wrong, the repercussions of something going out wrong will be far worse than a delay of 5-10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. Ricardo, did you want to come back? I'm sorry I interrupted you. I beg your pardon. Ricardo? Oh, no. Okay. Okay. Questions to the floor. Got a few already. Mubarak, would you like to kick us off, please?
Good afternoon or good morning. Thank you, Bernt. Thank you, Ashley, and of course, Keys, Ricardo, and Martin, and everyone already available with us in this seminar. My question here, of course, we know life is full of stories. I know that you have chosen the story, of course, with the sort of the emotional. The story was read by, I believe, 1/5 of Norwegian. My question here is that what is because normally the impact of the journalist, it's not always been treated well in many of the different countries. But what was the impact for the story from both, from the journalism view in Norway, as well as from health and environment, which I'm sure that when you explain about some products that you find later on, but if you can elaborate into that, because you managed to get a mix of a story within all elements, I believe, the emotional, the environment, and of course the story of
Yes, thank you. We knew we had to be pedagogic in our work, because it's this is about chemistry and medical issues, very some of them quite difficult to understand. So we needed a person of flesh and blood to tell the people about this very complicated issue, and that's how I often work, to find a one single story, one human being, one craftful, powerful story who can take the readers into a complex matter. So it was very deliberately, and it was very surprising that it was read so good read, but sometimes you instinctively know that you have found something special because you write in a special way, and this way to structure the story, the way you to build the story. If you worked for some years, you suddenly know that this will work. This will work. So it's kind of a strategy with your heart outside on your sleeves. I mean, so it's you have both your brain and your heart with you in the work. And yeah, as you said, I think it was very nice comments. It's about the health issue, it's about the environmental issues, and it's a human drama. It's a human drama, and human dramas works very well to explain difficult matters. So, and but it can't be too much pathos. You have to balance and make important, essential stories, and not overdo the pathos, just to balance it rightly. So I don't know if I answered the question, but
no, that's fine. Thank you very much. Carlo Tesla, I see you're up there.
Unmute. Thank you. So a question for Ashley. I often see a PA media journalist out there in field, and I have to say they are a very brave bunch of journalists with their cameras, and they go everywhere in every situation. Unlike most of the journalists of big media outlets who tend to stay in their comfort zones. Journalists who work in agencies seem to be all over the place. So, but recently, due to all these restrictions, being brave is being discouraged as well in a way. They don't let you go there, they don't let you go there, authorities are everywhere, policemen are stopping you, go there, blah, blah, blah. So how have you been dealing with all these restrictions, and how has that impacted your journalists? And especially now for the Euros that are ahead of us, is that gonna be a problem?
Yeah, it's a good question, Carlo. It's interesting, really. It's sort of flipped in that it's worked to our advantage, bizarrely, in many ways, in that a lot of governing bodies are not wanting lots of journalists there. So looking at more pool arrangements and agency arrangements. So with my press association hat on, it's helped us as a business because it's shown our value. Now, longer term, that won't be good. If I take my press association hat off and put on, I'm also the chair of the SJA, Sports Journalists Association, put that hat on, I would say that this is something that we'll need to make sure we keep a close eye on in future, because we don't want it to get to a position where the current norm remains the norm, because that would mean sports journalists are not getting the access, and we need sports journalists to have that access. We need a diversity of sports media at these events. So it's not really affected us. There's some decisions we've made where we've chosen not to go to events that we would have done. Some of that's been down to quarantine issues. For example, to go into America, you've got to quarantine when you get in. quarantine when you get back. So the Tyson Fury fight later this year, it would mean 10 days quarantine in America, 7 days covering the game, covering the fight, sorry, 10 days quarantining when you get back to the UK. I mean, it doesn't make any sort of financial sense to do that, and it's also quite a pain for the reporter as well to have to do all that. So we similar with the Azerbaijan Grand Prix last weekend. To get there, we'd have had to go via Turkey. A lot of logistical problems involved in that. Similar with Azerbaijan for the Wales games, they're playing 2 games in Baku. We're not going to go to that because it's just impossible to do. I think as we all accept, we're living in unprecedented times and we have to accept some of these annoying things. The key is that these annoying things don't continue once we've got on top of the COVID issue, and we need to get back to where we were. So we haven't seen, and with the journalists, we all have a health and safety debriefs, and they have we have before they go to events as well. So, for example, for Tokyo, one of our team has to be the COVID liaison officer, and they have direct contact with the IOC and all the Tokyo organisers. So everyone there's a lot of risk assessment going on prior to events that we give the journalists. Anyone who is unwilling to go on this because they have the fear of COVID or the infection or anything like that, then they have absolutely nothing to worry about. They can put their hands up and we will find out an alternative.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you. More questions out there? Or are you all stunned to silence? Stunned to silence by the look of it. What I didn't mention about Ashley when I introduced him, it was in the middle of the session, is that he is chair of the UK Sports Journalists Association, and therefore, as Gianni Merlo has repeated for you in these sessions, one of the major challenges we have is trying to maintain the level of journalistic employment. By that devolves on individual journalists to work particularly hard to make sure that we are all relevant. So it is a very important feature we have to be aware of. Question, we have Ivan from Nicaragua.
¿Cómo estamos? Ahí estamos, ¿me escuchan? Perfecto.
Right.
Perfecto. Mi pregunta es...
Ok,
mi pregunta sería la siguiente. ¿Cuál desde su perspectiva sería el futuro de las coberturas periodísticas tradicionales ante tantas trabas, ¿no? Porque por un lado ahora la pandemia te limitan, te restringen cada vez más en el aspecto de las coberturas, y por otro lado también está la situación de que uno a veces se acredita, llega a los lugares, a los eventos deportivos, pero no te permiten grabar. Ellos te dicen, aquí está este resumen que nosotros te proporcionamos, vos te limitás quizás a hacer algunas entrevistas, pero no podés captar algunos momentos. Entonces hay doble traba. Ahora la situación de salud por un lado, y por otro lado la situación de los derechos, ¿no? De los dueños de los eventos que te acreditan, pero que no te permiten hacer muchos recursos, digamos, de imágenes en las actividades deportivas para las cuales están acreditados. Desde ese punto de vista, ¿cuál sería el futuro del periodismo tradicional, de las coberturas?
Okay. Shall I take that one?
Yeah, Ashley, go ahead. Then actually, Bernt, you might like to come in as well because of your in-depth work. Yeah, Ashley, start.
I'll go quickly. I think that's a very, very relevant and excellent question. I think that if we take a grown-up approach, when the pandemic happened last year, we had to accept these issues. We had to accept pooling. We had to accept only a certain amount of photographers are allowed in for health and safety reasons. I think to not accept that would have been foolhardy. I think We are now getting to the stage as the vaccine rollout steps up and as we come out of lockdowns, that we have to start fighting for editorial journalistic rights again, and making sure that people are getting in to sporting events to report on them for their publications, not accept a written report from the team or the quotes from the team, where we're not allowed to ask the questions that we want to ask. So I am certain this is going to be an issue that we will be talking about for the next few months, if not years. I fear this could be a problem that we have within the sports journalism industry, and it's something we need to quite rightly get on top of, fight for, and your concerns are absolutely right, and you spoke really well about them there. So yeah, Bernt, if you've got anything to add.
You need to unmute, Bernt.
Sorry, I've got not the translation instruments installed. There was something wrong here. So please, if anyone can be kind to translate the question, we'll be able to answer it.
Yes, Bernt, I can help you with the question was about the future and the restricted access in terms of the pandemic, but also the digest content that we are getting from organizers that provide you with the package of edited content and give us restricted also access and limitations to get to the athletes, for example, to take images or to shoot. So both the pandemic and also the kind of protective environment that the news, the tournaments are getting.
Well, in terms of the pandemic, in our news organization, we have got the same challenges as everyone, and we have tried to do more other types of journalism. We're doing the news, but we're trying to do more long-term working and profile working, and so it creates another room, another possibility when we got stopped. But obviously, it's very. My colleagues has really difficulties sometimes during the last 16 months to administrate to make things happen. So I work mostly in documentaries right now. So I'm lucky enough to not be so much involved in that things. So thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bernt. Questions, Maritza Cardenas. Maritza, oh yeah, okay.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Bernt and Ashley, both for giving us an insight of different parts of journalism that are very important and interesting. But my question now is for Bernt. There are possibly hundreds or thousands of stories happening every day, and when you decide to go back in time to do a follow-up in a story, do you have any special methodology or criteria to say, yes, I want to investigate this one because I can see the potential that right now it can lead me to a very interesting story after all this time?
Yes, well, we have plenty of stories, both in close future and in the distant past. Sorry, we just I just sometime if I've ever got some time, I read. We've got a digital archive of our own newspaper. Last 100 years. So sometimes if I'm got enough time, let's say I go to a date or a year that's not too far away, maybe, but it's not close enough that either. So maybe 10 or 20 years. Started January the 1st, and I'm sure you'll find some fantastic news stories you can bring up to the light today. And also some short stories, short notes in the newspaper, maybe well, some well, accident, if well, that's not sports though, but let's say if a 5-year-old child was saved by a guy who was running towards a lake or something, and you have all these stories every day. You can read about this sudden news stories happening our world, and then you can I mean, as soon as you're trained to it, your brain is trained to stop with these stories. It's easier. So as soon as so I'm sure in a year's time it will be an obsession for you to, I can use a story of this and this and this and this. So I've got hundreds of stories just waiting to be written. So I have to share with my colleagues. So it's a very interesting way to train the brain to find these stories.
Thank you very much. Hashem Ali from Yemen.
الأستاذ برنت أو آشلي ذكر أنه يجب أن تكون القصص الصحفية فيها نوع من التنوع وعدم الرتابة. كيف يمكن أن نجعل القصة الصحفية أكثر تنوع وعدم الانحياز فيها عن بقية القصص الأخرى، سواء كانت قصص سياسية أو أخبار سياسية أو اقتصادية؟ شكرا.
So it is known that you can work in very diverse articles or works. So how can you maintain your objectivity and while writing articles that are diverse, whether they were political or sport, environmental? So how do you maintain your objectivity in those different subjects of specialty?
Is that for me? I can take it up if it is.
He was referring to either Ashley or Bernt. The question is for both of you.
Ashley, you start.
Okay, I'll go very quickly. It's a good point. Impartiality is important at PA. We do, if I look at news, we cover a lot of politics. And I think as long as you report what people say accurately and do not put any of your own comment in there and seek rights of reply when suitable, then you will have a balanced report. When it's the election time in the UK, we often get complaints from all parties about our coverage. I think that shows you're doing something right if they're all complaining about it. When it comes to football, I often have to pull up our journalists sometimes when you see little bits creeping in on stories that might show a little bit of their bias. When you know someone's football allegiance, for example, and you read a report, you can sometimes see that maybe they have, not on purpose, but have put something in there that is because they are like that team or don't like that team. So occasionally I have to pull them up on it, but I think as an agency reporter, having that integrity and balance is something that is ingrained in you, and you get to learn that.
Bernt.
Yeah. Accuracy was one of the first thing I learned in the journalism school. So accuracy is one of the golden important values to bring in my work. And also when I work with these long stories, you need to be accurate, and that's why I tried. Well, but if you are to to write about something happening many years ago, which I sometimes do, 20 or 30 years, the level of accuracy might go down. So that's put a more pressure on the journalists to go the extra mile to confirm it and to speak to even more persons and not give up there. So accuracy is very important also in these more, call it artistic or more long form genres.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, both of you. I have to say we are just about to run out of our time with the simultaneous translation of Interprify. So at this point, I'll just like to do the formal thing, which is to thank Bernt and Ashley for their fascinating contributions. I think we have had a wonderfully rounded view of the challenges, the tasks, and the potential of journalism in sport and around personalities, people in sport and beyond. Because obviously we know that sports journalism does not just exist in a vacuum of its own. We are part of a much wider industry and so on. I would like, obviously, again, to pass on to you all the best wishes of our president, Gianni Merlo, whom I'm sure will be very upset that he's missed the debate that we've had today, but I'm sure he will pick it up on the recording, which you can all do, of course, if you want to go back over any information later. Thank my fellow mentors, Martin Mazur, Riccardo Romani, Jean-Paul Savard, and you know very well that you will see them, talk to them, exchange information with them later in the week at the usual tutorial sessions that we are running. This is the last week of the e-college. We've been going, this is the 6th week. I'm sure you're all very sad for that and you'd like us to go on, but as you know, there is some sports coming up, particularly this summer, that might slightly get in the way of the tutorials. So thank you all very much, those of you who have been with us. Thank you again to Bernt and Ashley, and we'll see you later in the week. Obviously, if anyone wants to stay on and discuss things a bit further now, they're very free, very welcome to do so. But anyone who has to rush off and write that quick, immediate story, or is inspired to investigate a story that they wanted to attack for a long time, then please feel free. And with one last thank you, and that is to all the staff at AIPS headquarters, who, as ever, have done a great job today. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all of you. Bye.
Bye.